I remember the sound of coins clinking in my father's palm. Always too few, always counted twice. That sound was the soundtrack of my childhood. Loose change scraped across our kitchen table more often than plates did. My name is Emma Calderon, born in a small town, where the paint peeled from wooden porches and people didn't talk about dreams. They talked about discounts. Where you could hear your neighbors argue through thin walls, and privacy was a luxury, not a right. My parents fought constantly, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in screams. Always about the same things, money or the lack of it, groceries, rent, shoes that fit, medicine we couldn't afford. I would pretend to read at the kitchen table, but my ears were trained to catch every word. "You spent $50 at the store, Lena. Where do you think we're getting that back from?" my father shouted, his calloused hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I bought food for your kids, Leo," my mother snapped back, her voice brittle like glass about to shatter. "You want to feed them air? You could have waited. We could have stretched what we had." "You mean stretch the moldy bread and the can of beans?" I was 10 when I first learned to calculate overdue bill fees better than my times tables. I would take the electric bill and quietly add the extra $15 fee for being late. I knew which notices were final warnings by the color of the envelope. Red was bad. Pink meant we had a little more time. One night, the fighting was louder than usual. There was something desperate in their voices, something final. "I'm tired, Leo," my mother said. "Tired of pretending this is a life." "We're all tired," he yelled. "You think I'm out there working for fun? You're out there hiding from us. You come home with nothing and expect me to turn it into a meal. You think I don't feel like a failure every day?" That night, I hid with my little brother Mateo in the narrow hallway, behind the door where the wallpaper curled like dried leaves. He was 6, still thumb-sucking and quiet. I wrapped my arms around him as we listened to the last fight. "I can't do this anymore, Leo. I can't starve and pretend it's okay." Her voice cracked mid-sentence. "And where will you go, huh? Who's gonna take care of the kids?" "You can have them!" she screamed. "You never cared about us anyway." And then, the door. Slam. It didn't creak or groan like usual. It rattled in its frame like a final verdict. I waited for footsteps to return, but there was only silence. Mateo cried into my sleeve while I stared at the chipped floorboards, not knowing if I was supposed to cry too. The hallway was cold. My knees ached from sitting on the linoleum. Somewhere behind me, the faucet dripped. I memorized the rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up with Mateo curled beside me on the couch, his head on my lap. I watched the shadows on the wall shift as the hours passed. My father sat in the kitchen, drinking the last instant coffee straight from the jar with a spoon. His eyes were blank. By sunrise, I made myself a promise. I will never marry a poor man. Not because I hated my father, not even because I blamed my mother, but because I knew poverty eats love alive. It swallows it whole, spits out bitterness. I saw it every day in my house, in my neighborhood. Love didn't stand a chance when the heat was shut off, or your stomach growled louder than your heart. I watched my friends disappear from school when their parents couldn't afford gas to get them there. I saw kids steal lunch trays and get suspended for it. My world was a map of not enoughs. Not enough money, not enough food, not enough hope. So I swore, when I grew up, I would escape it. I would marry someone who didn't know what red envelopes meant. Someone who'd never counted coins with sweaty hands. Someone rich. I'd smile at them with soft eyes. I'd laugh at their jokes, even if they weren't funny. I'd say all the right things. Whatever it took to never end up like my mother, leaving with a broken voice and an empty purse. The morning after my mother left, my father didn't say a word. He made toast from the last few slices of bread, burned around the edges, and left it on a plate for Mateo and me. No butter, no jelly, just dry bread and silence. We never talked about her, not that day, not the week after, not ever. It was like she'd vanished into thin air, and all we had left was the echo of her footsteps down the porch stairs. I was 13 when I dropped out of school. Mr. Daly, the school counselor, tried to talk my father out of it. I remember standing in the principal's office, wearing my brother's hand-me-down coat and clutching a permission slip that I'd never signed. "She's a bright girl," Mr. Daly said, placing his hand gently on my shoulder. "Top of her class in English, and she shows real potential in writing. There are scholarship programs. Let her stay." But my father just stared past him, eyes ringed with exhaustion, jaw tight. "We need the money!" And that was it. I started cleaning houses that winter. A neighbor, Mrs. Fallon, took me with her on weekends. She paid me $5 for each home we cleaned together, sometimes $7 if the carpets needed scrubbing. I learned how to bleach without streaks, fold towels into perfect triangles, and smile politely even when people called me the help. I cleaned kitchens with granite countertops and bathrooms that sparkled. I dusted bookshelves with real leather-bound books, the kind I used to borrow from the school library. I vacuumed rooms bigger than our entire apartment. And I took notes. Mental notes. This is what money looks like. This is what safety smells like, fresh linen and lemon disinfectant. This is the life I will have. At night, I would lie awake, picturing the women whose homes I scrubbed. Hair smooth, voices calm, wedding rings catching the light. I imagined myself in their shoes, wearing silk instead of polyester, waking up in a bed that didn't squeak with every shift. And then I met Grayson Wells. I was 17, cleaning a gallery downtown with Mrs. Fallon when he walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there, at least not during our hours. The gallery was closed for renovations, and we were halfway through buffing the tile floors when the door opened. He was tall, older, maybe 35. His suit was expensive, tailored to his frame. His shoes looked like they'd never seen a puddle in their life. "Is Mr. Redford around?" he asked, voice smooth like jazz on a rainy night. Mrs. Fallon straightened her back and gestured to the office. He stepped out, should be back shortly. Grayson's eyes flicked over to me. I was kneeling, hands in yellow gloves, scrubbing a coffee stain. He smiled. "Working hard, I see." I nodded, unsure what to say. His presence felt like stepping into another dimension. A man made of silver and silk, standing in a room full of bleach and dust. When he left, I caught him glancing back at me through the glass door. 3 days later, he returned with coffee. "Thought you could use a break," he said, handing me a paper cup with my name written on it in black marker. That became our pattern. He'd show up unannounced, ask me questions about my life, my family, my plans. I told him I had none. I cleaned houses and watched my little brother while my dad worked night shifts at the factory. He listened, really listened. "You deserve more than this," he said one afternoon, sitting on the gallery steps beside me. "I know," I replied. He chuckled. "Most girls would say they're fine with the struggle. They'd try to be poetic about it. I'm not like most girls." He nodded, then leaned closer. "I like that." By the time I was 18, I was living in Grayson's downtown condo. He said I was too young to marry, but that we didn't need a piece of paper to prove anything. He bought me clothes, a phone, jewelry. He introduced me to his friends as his darling Emma, and they all smiled like I was some exotic stray he'd rescued. "You've turned her into a proper lady," one of them said, sipping champagne. "She was always one," Grayson replied, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "She just needed the right man to help her shine." At first, I believed him. He took me to places I'd only seen in magazines. I sat in restaurants where I didn't recognize a single thing on the menu and laughed at jokes I didn't understand. I posted pictures of sunsets and wine glasses on social media, tagging locations I never thought I'd step foot in. But the shine wore off quickly. It started small. Comments that felt like pebbles in my shoes. Maybe don't wear that dress. It's a little cheap looking. You sound cute when you don't talk too much. You should be grateful. You've got more now than you ever would have on your own. Then came the rules. Don't go out without telling him. Don't talk to male waiters unless spoken to. Don't visit my father's apartment without his permission. You're not a maid anymore, Emma, he said one night when I tried to bring leftover food to Mateo. Don't go crawling back to that world. You're better than that now. The truth? I was just another possession in his collection. His family hated me. They smiled in public and whispered in private. She's pretty, I guess, but she's not one of us, I overheard his sister say at a garden party. Didn't she drop out of school? Doesn't even have a GED? Grayson laughed and sipped his wine. She doesn't need one. She has me. The first time he hit me, it was because I spilled wine on the carpet. It was late. He was drunk. The glass slipped from my fingers and shattered near the fireplace. What the hell is wrong with you? He snapped, grabbing my wrist. I'll clean it. Just let me... Slap. The sound echoed louder than the shattering glass. I stood there, stunned, my cheek burning. Grayson, don't look at me like that, he growled. Don't act like a victim. He didn't apologize. He never would. He just bought me a bracelet the next day and acted like nothing happened. The cycle continued. The slaps turned into shoves. The shoves turned into bruises, but always hidden. Always in places that wouldn't show beneath silk blouses and long sleeves. Every time I tried to leave, he reminded me, you think you can go back to scrubbing floors? You think your father wants you back? You're nothing without me, Emma. And the worst part? For a while, I believed him. There was a time when I felt butterflies every time Grayson touched me. His fingers on my wrist, his hand on the small of my back, the low rumble of his voice saying my name like a secret no one else was allowed to hear. But now? Now I flinched when he walked into a room. He didn't even need to raise his voice anymore. His silence was worse. Controlled. Cold. Like the pause before a storm that you know will strike. He kissed me one morning in the kitchen while I was pouring coffee, just a small kiss on the corner of my mouth, something casual, something innocent, and I recoiled. Not visibly, not enough for him to notice. But inside, every part of me stiffened. My stomach turned at the scent of his cologne, amber and cedarwood, the same scent I once buried my face into. Now it clung to my skin like smoke. He didn't notice, or maybe he did and pretended not to. He just smiled that polished, practiced smile and said, "You look tired. Maybe book a facial today, When he left the room, I stood there holding the mug with both hands, fingers trembling slightly. I realized I hadn't kissed him back in months. I had stopped sleeping in his bed 2 nights a week by faking stomach aches or late-night reading. But what terrified me most was how numb I'd become. There was no fight left in me, just existence. It was a Thursday when I found the photo. I was scrolling through Grayson's tablet while waiting for a grocery order. He had left it open on the kitchen counter and I needed to check an address. That was it. But I saw a folder titled Venice 2020. We'd never gone to Venice. Curiosity bloomed like a slow poison. I tapped it open. Dozens of photos. Of Grayson, of a woman. Their hands were interlocked. Of a bed I didn't recognize. Of a kiss. A real one. Not casual. Not posed. One that held fire. I stared at the images, blinking rapidly, like maybe I could unsee them if I moved fast enough. The final photo showed her wearing my necklace. The pearl drop he gave me was on our second Christmas together. I dropped the tablet. It thudded against the counter, then slid onto the floor. My breath caught in my throat like I'd swallowed glass. He came home late that night, humming under his breath, jacket slung over his shoulder. "You're home early," he said, tossing his keys onto the marble island. Missed me? I stepped out of the shadows of the hallway, tablet in hand, the photo pulled up like a loaded weapon. His eyes flicked to the screen. His smile didn't fade, not at first. "Ah," he said coolly. "You've been snooping." "Who is she?" He poured himself a drink. "Emma. You of all people should understand. Sometimes people need an escape. I stared at him, stunned. You think I'm the escape? I think you're the reward, he said, walking toward me slowly. For playing the game right. For pulling yourself out of the gutter. Don't ruin what you have by acting entitled. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. My hand tightened around the tablet. He came closer, reached out, touched my face with the same hand that had once left bruises on my ribs. Don't cry, sweetheart, he whispered. You know I always come back to you. That's when I knew I hated him. Not just for what he'd done, not even for the betrayal, but because he thought I would stay, that I would accept it, that I would be silent. And worst of all, he was right. I had been silent for too long. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the moonlight crawl across the ceiling and made a plan. I'd already withdrawn a little cash over the last few months. Quietly, slowly. He didn't notice. Men like Grayson never count pennies. I'd hidden it in a Ziploc bag under a loose floorboard in the guest room. I packed a small bag the next morning, just the essentials. Some clothes, my old journals, Mateo's drawings, the necklace, not because I loved it, but because I wanted to sell it. And the tablet, the photos, collateral. When I stepped out into the hallway, I looked around one last time. The walls were painted ivory, the chandeliers, the polished floors I used to scrub for strangers. Let someone else polish this prison, I whispered to myself. I left the door wide open behind me. The cab ride out of the city felt like floating. The driver didn't ask questions. He glanced once at me through the rearview mirror, his eyes catching the slight swelling on my cheek that I hadn't covered well enough with makeup. But he said nothing, just turned up the radio and let me disappear quietly in the back seat. I had nowhere to go, no plan beyond a way. I ended up in a rundown motel an hour outside the city. It smelled like mildew and cigarette smoke, but I didn't care. I locked the door, wedged a chair beneath the knob, and collapsed onto the scratchy bedspread. I slept for 13 hours straight. When I woke up, I checked the burner phone I'd bought the night before. No messages, no missed calls. Grayson hadn't noticed I was gone. Or maybe he had, and this was just his way of telling me I wasn't worth chasing. It should have made me feel free, but it didn't. It made me feel invisible. A week passed before I worked up the nerve to contact anyone. I wrote Mateo a letter, old school style. I didn't trust texts, didn't want anything traced. I mailed it to our father's apartment with no return address. I told him I was okay, that I'd left Grayson, that I was trying to figure things out. I begged him not to tell anyone. Not yet. Just wait for me. 2 weeks later, I got a letter back. Emma, I'm glad you're safe. Dad's been sick. He doesn't say much, just watches TV and asks if you're coming home. I miss you. I hate that guy. I knew he was bad the day he told me to call him Sir. Please stay strong. Love, Mateo P.S. I still have your notebook. I read your poems sometimes. You're really good, Em. I cried for the first time in months, really cried. The kind of sobs that came from deep in my chest, where years of silence had built up into a scream. I was working at a diner a month later when it happened. Small town, cash only pay, off the books. The owner, a grumpy old woman named Lenora, didn't ask for a resume, just said, "You look like you need work. Aprons are in the back." I was scrubbing a ketchup stain off a booth when the bell above the door chimed. And there he was. Grayson, in a three-piece suit, out of place and gleaming like he'd just stepped off a magazine cover. I froze. He spotted me instantly, walked over slowly like a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. "Emma," he said softly, like we were lovers in a secret garden instead of strangers in a roadside diner. I didn't answer. "Is this what you've been doing? Slinging hash browns for truckers?" He glanced around with a sneer. "What do you want?" He sat in the booth, smiled. "To bring you home." "There is no home." He sighed as if I were the one being difficult. "Emma, we both said things we didn't mean. You hit me. His smile faded. I forgave that, I continued. I forgave everything, Grayson, but I'll never forgive myself if I go back to you. You don't have a choice. That's when I pulled out the envelope from my apron pocket. I had made copies of all the photos, his texts, the bruises, his threats. Try me. He stared at it, eyes narrowing. If you touch me again, if you so much as show up in my shadow, this goes to the press, and you're bored, and your sweet little girlfriend in Venice. His face shifted, cold, reptilian. You were nothing when I met you, and now I'm the girl who can ruin you, I said quietly. After he left, I trembled for an hour like I was in the walk-in fridge, but something inside me had changed. I wasn't his anymore. I wasn't anyone's. I was mine. I took the poems Matteo mentioned, my journals, my memories, and I began to write again. Late at night in my motel room, I poured out every scream I had never spoken, every bruise I'd hidden, every kiss I'd learned to hate. The first piece I posted was anonymously. It was titled, "The Man Who Smelled Like Cedarwood." It went viral within 3 days, not because it named him, but because it named the truth. 6 months later, I had an agent, a book deal, a bank account that finally had more than 2 digits. But more than that, I had letters. From women like me. From girls who had dated older men and thought they were being rescued. From wives who had hidden black eyes behind designer sunglasses. From survivors who said my words were the mirror they didn't know they needed. Grayson tried to sue. He said it was defamation. My lawyer laughed. Try proving you weren't the man in that story. He withdrew the suit. Coward. He faded from the headlines a month later. Someone new was caught in a bigger scandal. That's how it always goes with men like him. They fall into the cracks they used to step over. I bought a small home in the country. Nothing fancy, just mine. It has a porch with peeling paint, on purpose, and a room with yellow curtains for when Matteo comes to visit. Sometimes I still hear the echo of my father counting coins. Sometimes I still see Grayson in my dreams, standing in a hallway with wine-stained carpets and hands that sting. But now, when I dream of him kissing me, I don't flinch. I fight back. And then I wake up and write another chapter. Because that's what survivors do. We write, we rebuild, and we never forget the taste of freedom. It took almost a year before I returned to the city. Not to visit the past, but to reclaim a piece of it. I took the train to Matteo's neighborhood. His building was still the same, graffiti on the stairwell, the elevator broken as always. But when he opened the door, his face lit up like sunrise. Emma. He pulled me into a hug so tight it made me gasp. Is that a new sketchbook? I asked, eyeing the one on the table. Yeah, he grinned. Still can't afford art school, but I'm applying for a scholarship next semester. You'll get it, I said. He shrugged. I don't know. I need a better portfolio. I reached into my bag and handed him a white envelope. What's this? Your tuition. For the whole year, he stared at me. No strings, Matteo. You're not paying me back. You're just doing what you were always meant to do. He hugged me again. Didn't let go for a long time. Then we both went to visit Dad. He was thinner now, quieter. But when he saw me, his eyes welled up. I'm sorry, Emma, he whispered. I know, I said, crouching beside him. We both survived the same storm, just got swept in different directions. I moved him to the country house a month later, gave him a room with a window that looked out over the field, bought him a TV, a shelf full of old westerns, and a recliner that didn't squeak. He never asked me where the money came from. He just smiled, sipped his tea, and said, I always knew you'd do something big. I didn't. But I did something true, and sometimes that's even better. To any girl who feels lost. If you're watching this, maybe you've seen some of the things I have. Maybe you felt invisible, or unloved, or trapped by choices that weren't even yours. I want to tell you a few things I learned, things I wish someone had whispered to me when I was younger. 1. Where you come from does not define you. I was born in a house full of shouting and empty cupboards, but that wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning. You are not your circumstances. You are what you choose to become. 2. Survival is a quiet kind of strength. There were nights I didn't think I'd make it, but I did. And every time I got up, even with a heavy heart, I was building a kind of strength no one could see, but I felt it grow. 3. Love should never hurt. If someone says they love you, but they control you, shame you, or raise their hand to you, that's not love, that's a trap. Real love never asks you to shrink. 4. Money doesn't make someone worthy. I thought marrying into wealth would rescue me. Instead, I had golden cages and bruises I had to hide. Don't confuse comfort with safety. 5. Your voice matters, even if it shakes. When I finally spoke out, I thought no one would listen, but they did. And more than that, I helped others speak too. Tell your story. Someone needs to hear it. 6. Helping others helps you heal. I saw a girl once who reminded me of myself. I helped her, and somehow, in doing that, I started to feel whole again. 7. You can walk away. You can begin again. The scariest thing I ever did was leave, but the second scariest was staying. You are allowed to change your life. You are allowed to choose yourself. 8. Your power is already inside you. No one gave me strength. I built it myself. From silence, from scribbled poems, from every time I said no more. You have that power too. I promise. So to the girl out there, sitting with a suitcase of doubt and a heart full of hope, I see you. You're not alone. You're not broken. And you are not too late. Love, Emma.